In this video, we will talk about 3 best chess opening principles, not memory. These are the most straightforward chess opening ideas. You don't even need to memorize them. All we have to do is to understand them. Any other principles that you might think may fall under one of them, apply them and take your game to the next level. Number 1, center control. Shown here is the initial phase of a chess game. We're going to identify the center squares as d4, d5, e5, and e4. We can also extend these squares to these squares being highlighted in red. Now we have created a big square in the middle of the board. These are the key central squares. We're going to control them in the opening phase in order to have a grip in the center. Now, why is that so? Now, fun fact, in every chess game, almost all of the pieces pass through the center. Imagine this white knight can go to this square f3. This bishop many times goes to c4. This one goes to f4. The other knight to c3. And in other words, these pieces becomes active. Number 2, correct piece placement. In other words, we have to develop or activate our pieces. Now listen to this. It's not enough to develop your pieces. We should know where to develop them. Now, I will give you some tips on where to place your pieces for the knight. Rule of thumb, knights need support points. If we are to move here for white, what would be the best move? Perhaps you want to move your knight to e5, and that would be a good move. Now, for example, black wants to challenge that one with knight d7. Therefore, we provide support point already for our knight through this f4 bishop, and we can add additional support d4. And if you look at the position closely, there are no weakness for the white's position, right? Now, let's go over to the second minor piece, the bishop. Now, simple rule for the bishop. Bishops need open positions. That's all. Now, if we are to move here, what are the best move for white? Now, we know that our bishop on c1 is underdeveloped, and we have a fianchettoed bishop on g2, but it's somewhat blocked. So there are a couple of candidate moves here. First, we can move this pawn to b3 to give space for our dark square bishop to be fianchettoed as well, and therefore putting pressure on kingside. And maybe we can also move this knight to h2 to g4, and that would give way for our white's bishop to be unblocked and active, providing additional support to this e4 pawn. So there are a lot of moves, okay? How about for the queen? Perhaps you already heard this a lot. Don't move your queen too early in the opening phase. And that is true. Alright, we have to put our queen on squares or square where it can provide additional support to those pieces that have been developed already. We do not need to put our queen or expose our queen in the center of the board because it can be threatened or harassed by opposing or by opponent's pieces. For example, in this amateur game that we have, white played e4, e5, and queen g4. Now, this is actually a bad move. Move to pawn to d5, and that created a discovered attack on our queen here, right? So this discovered attack makes our queen move again to f3. Black takes, queen takes, knight c6 to support this pawn, f3 rather, f6. Now, black's pieces are being developed while pushing or providing pressure on our queen, and that would be a very bad tempo for white. And queen needs to move again. Bishop e7. Now, the bishop is developed to e7 and providing a pressure on queen again. Knight c3, knight d5, giving again and a discovered attack to the white queen, and again, queen needs to move, and g6 and many more moves happened. Now, if we count how many pieces have been developed for white, that would be 3. 2 minor pieces for the knights and queen that's being harassed and has to move somewhere from time to time, and that's very bad because we are wasting a lot of tempo. For black, 3 minor pieces and few pawns, and that would be very, very advantageous to him. Therefore, do not move your queen early in the game. Just put them on square or squares that can be helpful for those who have been developed already. All right? Now, I think we have one last piece, and that will be the rook. A simple rule for the rook. Rooks need open files. If not, put them on semi-open files. Semi-open files are files that can be opened at some point in time. All right? So if we are white here, we can move this either one of these rooks to c1 square. That because this file is already open. Rook f to c1 is a fine move, as well as rook a to e to c1 rather, and that will be a very good move for white. All right? Number 3, castle. I cannot emphasize this further. King's safety is important. Castle as early as you can. It's useless to create and provide a lot of huge attack to the opponent's pieces when your king is already checkmated, right? Therefore, at the opening phase of the game, as much as you can, castle. Okay? King's safety is priority. Now, let's go over here to one example. The next move here should be king safety and castling on king side. If not, black can take advantage of this open e file. For example, white wastes some time by h3. And therefore, black can have a check in there and you don't have any more pieces to cover that check. This move doesn't help because of f6 and this knight is pinned and you are going to be one piece down. Okay? And therefore, king has to move somewhere and you lost your right to castle, right? So therefore, as much as you can, when you can, castle. I'm going to show you a very good game wherein we apply all those rules that we have learned, all right? This is a game between Garry Kasparov and an amateur player, Juliano Terao, a Garry Kasparov simultaneous exhibition in Sao Paulo, Brazil in 2004. Now, let's take a look how the game progresses, all right? Now, Garry is white here. He plays d4. Black plays d5. c4, e6, knight c3, knight f6. This is Queen's Gambit opening, right? And this is the exchange variation, okay? Now, you notice this is a very good move here. Bishop from c1 moved to g5 to pin the knight. Okay, another variation, it also moves to f4 before pushing this pawn to e3, right? So bishop g5 is a pin. Black plays bishop e7, e3. All right, that's a very, very good move here to put the bishop on g5 first before pushing your pawn to e3. Castle, that's a very good move also for black. Bishop d3. Now, putting this bishop on d3 creates a very good diagonal and pressure to the king side. Black plays h6. Now, he wants to threaten this bishop. What do you gotta do? You want to capture an f6 or what? But of course, being Garry Kasparov, there's no any good reason yet to capture an f6. Bishop e6 is actually a very good move as well, because you're putting your bishop into a better square, providing additional support to this d5 pawn, and still being active in here. Knight ge2. This is a good choice by Garry. Normally, players play this knight to f3 because they wanted to put a grip on this e5 square. And this is a support point. We already learned this. Knights need support point. But Garry has a different... Perhaps he wanted to attack this bishop on e6 with knight f4. Alright, and then capture this bishop. And when this bishop is captured by this f pawn, this is going to be a... in the middle game, this is going to be a weak square here. But that will be a different lesson for us to learn, okay? Now, let's continue what black did here. Knight bd7, castles. Alright, castle when you can, right? c5, pressuring the central pawn. Now imagine an amateur player facing Garry Kasparov with this move, these are great opportunity to provide or play or have a playable position right in the opening and going into the middle game or entering into the middle game. Now, what did Garry do? All right, this is a very useful move, putting your rook to c1. With the move c5, this file in here, the C file, is going to be a semi-open file in the near future. So at some point in time, these pawns can be exchanged, right? If for some reason, this will going to be a huge file for the rook to occupy. Therefore, this move by Garry is no-brainer. And of course, this black player is very good player, I guess, because he knows what he's doing, right? He put his rook on c8 to somewhat neutralize or put his rook also as well to a semi-open position, a semi-open file. All right. Bishop to b1 is a good move as well. I don't know, maybe Garry wants to threaten some mate in the future, all right? With queen to d3. a6, preventing the knight jump on b5, okay? Controlling the square. Now, the opening phase is completed already. It's done. We're entering the middle game. And if we are to look and assess the position, bishops need open position. This is going to be advantage for white versus black's bishops. Why? Because his white or light square bishop is good, right? It's not blocked, but his dark square bishop is somewhat blocked. Therefore, we give a plus point for white. Let's go to the knights. The knights doesn't have any support points yet, okay? But white's control to the center is somewhat playable versus black's control. So I think the knights are pretty good as well. Queen. If you notice, queen doesn't have to move right away. And this is going to be a good battle in the middle game. Both colors have castled already, so the king safety is not an issue anymore. Let's continue what happened. Knight f4. Garry decided to put his knight more on the center portion of the board. And again, he wants to capture this bishop with the knight. And if this f1 recaptures, we have a very good square here, light square. We're going to learn this one in the middle game, right? And what did black do? He captures, recapture with a pawn, knight b6. The black player identifies that he needs to put his knight here on the c4 square, and that would be very, very good square. This is going to be a support point for knight because we have a pawn on d5. What did Garry do? d3. All right, this is a very obvious threat for Garry. He wants to take this knight and mate. But of course, I think black saw this one and he blocks. Now, this creates pressure. This queen to d3 move creates pressure on the black pieces. And g6 here doesn't have any sense because Garry just sacrifices knight on g6 and advantages position already. This player, black player, creates a very big mistake and actually he sacrifices a pawn in order to recover the game in the game. So Garry first took on the bishop on e6, f takes, bishop takes e7, queen takes e7, and Garry is one pawn up. Okay, and queen f6. Okay, this is actually a bad move because Garry then captures the c8 rook with his own rook, and the player resigned. Why? Because the next threat here is not to check on h7 because king will just go up here and nothing happens after. The next move here, the black player resigned because next move would be queen takes b7, white. Now, lesson learned, all right? Black pieces didn't have any problem until that threat of Garry on queen d3 and just made a mistake. And Garry just moved these pieces the right way. Knight, centralized, bishop, open positions. Queen doesn't have to go out early or be exposed early until it is needed, all right, in the middle game usually. And castling, that's all. And Garry caused his opponent to create a mistake and eventually won the simultaneous exhibition game.
Hey, check this video out to make sure that you get more important information to bring your chess to the next level.